All right, guys, this is Design 113. This is our final week. I'm so happy to be able to say that. I know you guys are probably relieved that this mod is over, but I'm also gonna miss seeing your work. You guys have done awesome this last week. I think everybody pretty much hit a home run on the portrait illustration, so I'm really proud of you guys. How do you think the week 3 work went? Think it went pretty good? Were they fun assignments at least? Hopefully you guys were having some fun. All right. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to jump into lecture. We've got a lot to cover, and I'm going to be going over how to do the final project. So if you guys have any questions at all, feel free. We're going to go ahead and stop the video and jump into the lecture. Let me go ahead and share. All right. Can you guys hear me okay? Everything coming in loud and clear? You don't have sound? Yeah, Norma, I noticed that you're probably going to have to adjust your settings. It didn't show that you had a mic. So you might have to go either sign back in or... Sandy, you can hear me okay? So the sound is coming through. Okay. Norma, I would just sign out and then sign back in and see if that helps. Those technical difficulties, they get us every time. Okay, well, let's start off. This week we're going to be talking about grids. You have quite a heavy assignment to do. It's going to be a culmination of your invitation design and your artwork that you did, your illustration, your logo design. You're going to be incorporating those same similar skills that we use to apply to those designs. We're going to be using them in our final project, our magazine layout. We're going to be doing a magazine layout. So I'm really excited. Here's an example here that is about elements of a page. And it goes and talks about the terminology and what one is. And we're going to be talking a little bit about elements of a page. But I have a... Oh, whoops. No, I don't. I thought I had a video, but the video's after this slide. Sorry. All right. Oh, there you go, Norma. Now you've got a mic. Okay, so hopefully it's working. Perfect. Okay, so let's talk about elements of a page. A header, what is a header? Can you guys tell me what a header is? Why is a header important? Yeah, it's the title of the article. Right, Norma, exactly. And it's usually one of the bigger elements on the page. Sometimes it's the biggest element on a page. So next to any photography or artwork or graphics, the header is usually the largest element, and it's right here. And I love this example here because it gives you can even take a screenshot if you want, because you're gonna need to see this visual, see where things are placed. You've got the image here to the right. Headers are always at the top. The byline, look how, is the byline very big? How big or small would you say the byline is? Yeah, it's very small, like 8-point font. Exactly. So it's very small in comparison to your header. So we want to make sure that when you're including the byline that it's small. So we need to pay attention to the elements that are meant to be big and the elements that are meant to be small. Look here, how many drop caps do you see in the whole layout? Just one, right? So I've seen some, I guess for the, was it the invitation? Oh no, it was the layout for your art, for your font that you chose, the article that you wrote up. Some students had drop capped each paragraph. We only need one drop cap. It just shows the reader this is where the story begins. We don't need to show them where each paragraph is. So, hey Brianne, thanks for coming. We're just talking about elements of a page and with our page layout, because this is what we're going to be doing for our final project. Now, we want to make sure that each paragraph there's a return. How many indents do you see on the paragraphs? None, right. There are no indents. because they've chosen to give a hard return. Now, if they didn't put a hard return or a space between paragraphs, then they would need to indent to show this is where the new paragraph starts. So it's one or the other. Some students did both, but what we need to do, remember, is that it's either a hard return and no indent, or it's no return and you indent. So remember, just pick one or the other to go with. Subheads are great because it kind of it breaks up all that text and gives you something else to look at, and also tells you what section you're in, and that's really helpful. When you hear me refer to outside margin, I'm referring to this portion here on the left side, and then the inside margin is this portion here, the white space on the inside of the page. Your gutters are the space between your text boxes. When you're laying out your text, I want you to be mindful of the gutters. We need to set pretty good standard size for your gutters so that there's some breathing room. We don't want text boxes touching each other, and we don't want lines of text or words touching each other in different columns. We want there to be proper elbow room. Think of how much room would you want on an airplane? Do you get enough elbow room when you're sitting on an airplane? I feel like sometimes our gutters are so tight that it leaves everyone kind of claustrophobic. We need to kind of give some breathing room to it, okay? So those gutters, we want to make sure there's even amount of space between our columns of text. Now I circled here this word widow. Please be mindful that you don't have what we call widows at the end of our paragraphs. And so as you're laying out your magazine design, if you see a widow, either try to adjust the tracking a little bit, or you can try to adjust the width of your text columns. Now remember, you want your text column width to be the exact same, so you might have to adjust all three. That's a good question, Brianne. There's no standard spacing. I think in InDesign it will default to something. So I'll pull up my InDesign real quick and see what it defaults to. We'll go over how to lay it out and set up the document in just a minute, but I think it might be 1 pica. Let me see. Yeah, gutters are about 1 pica. So if you don't have picas set up for your units of increments of measurement in your InDesign, you can kind of do the math, what it would come out to in inches. So 1 pica is about the standard, and it will give you enough breathing room between text boxes. That's very important. And we want that even space. So notice here, guys, let me see if I have if I'm able to color on this at all. Let's see, give me an option to paint. Oops. Oh, it's not gonna let me. Oh wait, here we go. Okay, so you pick a color you can see. I don't think it's going to let me. Nope. Okay. Well, anyways, the inside margin and the outside margin need to be evenly spaced. So one can't be closer to the other. You need to make sure it's all evenly spaced. And let's see, what else would you need to know? Oh, the bottom margin. We need to make sure, this is a poor example of it, but we need to make sure that your lines of text end at the same point at the bottom of the page. I'll show you an example as we go into the tutorial and the demo for this, but those are some things that I'm going to be looking at. Is, do your lines end at the same point, at the same ruler, the horizontal ruler? And do you have any widows? Is everything evenly spaced? I'm going to be looking for proportions and hierarchy and making sure that things aren't all large on your page, that you do have some small, some large, and that you're consistent. This layout, how does this layout create contrast and visual interest? What are some things that this layout uses to create visual interest? Bolding things, right? They don't bold everything, and they're very selective. I only see one pull-out quote here that was bolded, so that draws me in as a reader. And pull-out quotes are usually things that just kind of like the hook line kind of phrases that will get someone interested in reading more. And then obviously your subheads are awesome to bold because it breaks up those heavy columns of text and gives you something visually interesting to look at. Exactly. So those are some ways. Also, you can use artwork. In this case, for our final project, we're not going to be using graphics. We will only be, or I'm sorry, photographs. We'll be using graphics or relying heavily on the typography. Are there any questions about elements of a page? If you need to take a screenshot of this, that's great. One last thing I did want to point out is the folio here at the bottom. You're going to be required to include a folio. So everything that you see here on this page is going to be required in your final project. So make sure that you have your 3-column grid, you've got a top margin header, you've got your folio at the bottom left and the folio on the bottom right of each page. And then you will be including the name of your magazine, the page number, and I will show you how to do that. But just make sure that you properly lay things out. All right, if there's those questions, we're going to jump right into the function of a grid. Woo-hoo. And then I'm going to do things a little bit backwards. We'll go over the quiz questions if we have time at the end of class. I just want to make sure that we get these in because this is important. This will pertain to your final project. Everything that we're going to be doing in class is going to be exactly what you're going to need to know. So let me stop the share. I'm going to go ahead and pull up internet. Hold on, give me 1 second. Once that pulls up, can you guys hear it?
What is a graphic design grid? A grid you might think of as graph paper or lots of lines on a page dividing things up into small segments. But in graphic design, a grid is basically an organizational system that you use to help organize elements on your page and maintain unity and consistency. There are different kinds of grids and different ways of using them. And here we're going to take a look at a website that shows some of the examples of grids you can use and also the importance of deciding upon a grid at the beginning of your project and sticking to it as you place your design elements. So here I have a website called designersinsights.com. It's worth a look through to look at the different options that it has, but this page covers, I think, the idea of layout grids in a very simple and easy to understand way. And they mentioned that there are two main kinds of layouts, vertical or landscape. Now, I'd like to expand on that a little bit. Vertical is also known as portrait. So if you see the term portrait, you'll know that it's vertical. And the term landscape also means horizontal. So portrait and landscape, vertical and horizontal. So there are two basic kinds of pages that you work on. If you're working in print, you'll very often be working on vertical pages and layouts. If you're doing work for the screen, such as for websites or other screen-based applications, you'll probably be more concerned with a horizontal layout. So there are different kinds of grids that exist to help you organize your pages. And generally, in graphic design, grids are referred to by the number of columns that they utilize, okay? They're not broken up as much into horizontal rows as they are into vertical columns. So here we have examples of 6 vertical pages using different kinds of grids. The 1-column grid fills the page with it fills the margins with imagery and graphic elements. 2 columns divides it into 2 columns. Now, these columns don't always have to be the same width. That's something that's good to remember. These examples do show equal width columns, but columns do not have to be equal, as long as there is a certain consistency throughout, say, a multi-page document. If you have one wide column and a narrower one on one page, it would be good to repeat that set up on the subsequent pages, again, for consistency. So we have 2 different versions of the 2-column grid here, and then we have 3 versions of the 3-column grid down here on the bottom row. Now, I recommend, generally speaking, that a 2 or a 3-column grid is the best way to go. It breaks up the space such that you can utilize it in many different ways. It will maintain the best readability for text, and it's really very versatile. Now, here's the idea about a grid. You want to adhere to it with your text and with headlines, with imagery, but then you can break out of it now and then for visual appeal. Look at this example down here, this one. The gray squares, which indicate imagery, they span a couple of columns, and this one goes to the edge of the page. It bleeds off. This one spans 2 columns. The text itself maintains the 3-column grid. So we have a nice balance of 2 and 3-column spanning here with imagery and text. And you'll notice that the headline of this example goes across all three of the columns without regard for the columns themselves. So that's breaking out a little bit, but it still all works together. And you'll notice that in all of these cases, with the exception of this bleeding off here and the silhouette of the woman, in every case, the outside margins are honored. Okay, there's a little bit of breakout here, but that's good because this is an image of a skateboarder and it wants to break out a little bit. So the idea of grid use is you adhere to those guidelines with the important pieces, and then you make conscious decisions about when to break out of the grid. So that's the basic idea, and that takes a little bit of practice and experience with laying out pages. But that underlying grid, which of course is invisible once things are printed or published, the underlying grid will help you as you get your skills and get your kind of your chops in order with graphic design. And it will prove to be a really helpful way for you to get comfortable with this concept. The next section here are landscape grids. These are the horizontal pages, and we're doing more of these now with website design and screen-based design. One word here about design for mobile apps. This is becoming much more of a graphic design skill because so many of us are using websites and screen-based apps on our phones. So the layout here isn't quite the same, and there are no examples of real grid use for mobile applications yet, but they're being developed, and they are probably one column based and very simple and easy to read because of course the screens are so much smaller. But let's say that we had the luxury of a whole big website screen to work with. The 2-column and the 3-column are very common here as well. We start to see more evidences of 4-column grids because we have such a wide screen to work with. The same principles apply. You honor the grid, but then you break out of it occasionally, maintaining readability at all times, bleeding off the edge when appropriate. One thing I don't recommend is using a 1-column grid, particularly with a landscape screen, because the line length of the text becomes really hard to read. It's too long, it's too much. People do it, but I don't recommend it. It's far better to go with a 2 or a 3-column grid. And again, if you have the information, you can successfully go with a 4-column grid. Again, this will take practice, and you will learn in time which is going to work best for your purposes. Further down on this page, here's a section about, this is specifically for printing. If you're working on a book that's going to be bound, here's a nice looking side view graphic of a perfect bound book. And you'll see that you lose some of your pages in the binding because of the way that it's put together. And this area here is known as the gutter of your page. So when your pages are laid out, you always want to keep in mind that you're going to lose a little bit of your page into the gutter, and you have to adjust your elements accordingly. You don't want to run text beyond the margin. If you want to have a photograph that bleeds across 2 pages, you're going to have to carefully crop it and place it such that it reads correctly when the book is opened. And professional printers know how to work with this. They know how to achieve that effect given their gutter width. So if you ever have to work with professional printers and come across a scenario like this, just be aware of the gutter and work with them to make sure your pieces come out correctly. Down here on this page, we have something that is somewhat related to grids, although not exactly. Really good to study the rule of thirds, which is a way of breaking up imagery into 9 squares or 9 sections and placing your elements of interest not dead center. They're more interesting if they're placed a little bit off to the side. You'll notice that the focal points here are placed at an intersection of the 9 block layout here. Much more interesting than if these things were dead center. And for those of you interested in mathematics and algebra, the golden ratio and the Fibonacci sequence are mathematical and geometric they are theories of visual balance. And I'm not going to go into it here. It's actually quite heavily mathematical. But the concepts of these golden spiral and Fibonacci sequences relate to visual balance too. So you might want to do research on these particular topics to learn more about this interesting concept here. Lastly, we remind you, this website reminds us to always start your design project with a grid. You really want to have that underlying structure, that underlying system set up so that you can be consistent across multiple pages and to have visual unity throughout your piece. Another reason to have a grid is sometimes you might be working with a team of designers. There might be other people working on the same project. And with an underlying grid, it's much more likely that the work that you produce together is going to be unified rather than having all different looks for a piece. Okay, so the grids are an honored and successful and reliable system for organizing your work for both typography work and imagery and all your graphic elements. Understanding the different kinds of grids and knowing how to work with them comfortably will be one of the things that will make you into a stellar graphic designer.
All right, we'll stop there. So what are some things that stuck out to you? Why are grids important? What happens if we don't use them? The format may be inconsistent. Yeah, exactly. You get a huge mess. And the layout is odd. That's right. It throws things off balance. We're looking for a visual harmony here. We want things to be unified and a consistent look. And a grid just helps keep things balanced. It's just like using a ruler when you're trying to draw a straight line. It just helps you keep everything lined up. So the function of a grid, well, it breaks up that space. It gives you regular balance. It tells you what columns you're in. And that's really, for the OCD person, this is really helpful and probably welcomed. This also establishes a system. This helps you to place your content in a space with organization. I was never good at cleaning up my room when I was a kid, and still even now it's a challenge. But I kind of come down with a system that kind of helps maintain the chaos a little bit. And it's kind of what grids do, the function of grids here now with layout and design. It establishes a system for arranging content within a space so it doesn't look like a hot mess. All right? There's structure to it. The grids are about you having total control. And you might think, oh, well, that sounds weird. If I'm confined to a space, how can I have the freedom to design? Grids just help keep balance. It's not a way to force you into a space. It allows you quite a bit of freedom. And once you can get the hang of designing in a grid, you'll be able to break the rules. So I always said, you learn the rules so you can break them. And just like some of the famous graphic designers like Paul Rand, he's a great designer, a great example. He breaks the rules all the time, the way he arranges content. But because he maintains a grid system, the skeletal structure is still there. So it isn't a hot mess. There is some method to his madness. Yeah. Okay, so again, we're going to look at this one. Grids are your friends. I want you to embrace them. Try opening your InDesign if you can. The final project will be designed in InDesign. And there's different types of grids. As we could see in the video, we went over a few of them. And I have one last one, and I like this one. The guy off of lynda.com really relates grids, the relationship to grids like your relationship in dating. And I thought this was kind of cool. And it's kind of a neat way of trying to create or trying to understand the concept a little bit more clear. So I'll play this real fast for you guys. Can you hear it?
Finding the right grid for the content is like dating. You need to look around, try a few out, let some go, and commit to one. And like the dating world, there are different types. One grid is just right for scholarly text, but not for a dance club's website. Classic book grids are often the simplest one-column grids. In this instance, the size of the column is defined not by the size of the book, but by the amount of copy that fits on one line. A good rule of thumb is to make a column no wider than 52 characters, or 2 alphabets, which is easier to remember. Any longer and the reader will give up. Corporate publications often use a multi-column grid structure. This allows more flexibility with content that may be more varied than a fiction novel. Magazines usually use several grids within a single issue. One grid is used for the main feature story, and another for the monthly departments. A magazine with a rigid grid structure and no variation will feel much more like an annual report. Imagine Us magazine, designed in the same corporate style as an annual report for your local bank. It would be clean and consistent, but dull as a box of hammers. Information graphics work best with more complex grids. This may involve columns of different lengths or specific zones for information. It's a good way to organize dense and hard to understand information. This also helps the viewer find the content they want. Newspapers have grids that are designed to accommodate information that changes daily. They are structured to provide the reader with several ways to access the content. I can scan only for the headlines or the images and get a quick sense of the news, or I can read the smaller copy for more detail. The grid here defines what kind of information is where. The rules for website design are always in flux, but the way we find information remains constant, and the grid structure is just as useful here as in a book. When I design a grid for a website, I use margins, columns, and hanglines. I lay out the content to aid the viewer's understanding, but I work with square proportions, which translate better in a square pixel environment. Recognizing specific grid types is an essential skill that enlarges your visual vocabulary. The next time you look at a book, poster, or website that you like, find the underlying grid structure. It's like breaking a code and seeing how the designer thought.
A membership to lynda.com unlocks this entire course and hundreds.
All right, so I thought that was kind of a cute video where it really shows some examples of different grid systems and how not all of them translate. So, all right, so welcome. It looks like we've got someone new. Thelica, thanks for coming. Thanks for showing up. Are there any questions so far about the videos that we've seen today? Any question about grids? What are they? How do you use them? Okay, things are pretty straightforward. All right. So here's the 12-column grid, okay? And you'll notice that there's difference. So you imagine there's 12 columns. So you could either have 12 individual small columns here at the top, or you can divide it into 2 and have 2 wider or 6 wider columns. Or you can even cut that in half and do 4, well, I guess not in half, but you could do 4 wider columns. So 3, I guess that would be divisible by the 3 columns. And then the 4-column grid, where you could fit 4 of those small columns into 1. And just notice how they're all laid out. There are 12 different, or not 12, but there's 6 different versions or layouts that you could do using the 12-column grid. We talked a little bit about the fluidity of content. This makes text flow easier. Consistency is key, and consider font size, your tracking, your leading, the color of the text, even paragraph divisions. And we learned this last week. Just another highlight to the rule that we learned, just a reminder. Remember to clearly indicate your paragraphs. Be careful not to, mess with the structure or the integrity of the text. But the 2 most common ways of indicating paragraphs are indenting or putting a hard return between your paragraphs. So only choose one type of indication to keep the text flowing. We don't want to do bold. We don't want to do drop caps on each paragraph. We don't do return and indent. It's kind of one or the other. So just remember to pick one. I'm going to want to see pull quotes in your final layout. So what are pull quotes, guys? What is a pull quote? We'll go back to the elements of our page. Yeah, it's a bolded quote. It stands out. It's usually typically in a different font, maybe the same font family, but it's usually maybe italicized or bolded, and it's quite a few sizes bigger than the actual body text. The reason being is we want to set it as kind of set it aside, but we want to make sure that it stands out. That's the word I'm looking for. We want to make sure it stands out above the rest. So it's supposed to catch your attention. It's supposed to look different than the rest. It's even supposed to add a artistic graphical element to the page. So yeah, sometimes it's in a different color, but that's what a pull quote is. And you'll often see, if you guys read magazines, just open up a magazine and you'll see them all over. It's kind of the magazine's way of kind of grabbing your attention to draw you into the article, or to break up heavy bodies of text, because articles can go for pages and pages, and there's got to be interesting ways to graphically create visual interest instead of just boring columns of text. So make sure also when you're doing a pull quote, make sure you have plenty of space around the pull quote text, and don't interrupt other text. Just make sure it's even amount of space, top, bottom, left, and right. Pretend there's just that nice elbow room that's even and consistent. And then lastly, we want to be able to include captions. Captions are kind of on the low on the hierarchy scale here, but they do explain content of images. You're not going to have captions per se, I guess, in this layout because you're not using photography, but captions are often used in newspapers or websites that use pictures or imagery. They're usually telling the story in about one line, and they usually are telling who took the picture, who the photographer was. So, or gives credit where credit's due. All right, any questions so far about grids or layouts? Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the composition here of a layout, and I think it's important to understand how to lay something out. Layout and design is a lot different than logo design, and really the trick to designing a great layout is kind of making sure that your composition is consistent. Now, successful design in publishing, advertising, web design, illustration, and just about anything else that ties together elements depends on drawing in the reader and leading their eyes across the page. You'll often hear me refer to visual hierarchy. You're telling me where you want my eyes to look first and where my eyes should go last, or how they should scroll the page. Some people think it's not a big deal, that designing on a page comes naturally because of cultural lessons that we learn growing up and looking at design from childhood. Yet few, if any, understand why it works the way it does. In most societies, we read left to right. So sounds simple. You just start on the left side and it will kind of fall into place from there, basically. But the challenge is to make the reader look at elements in the right order. So, or at least the order you want them to see it. So, which is kind of the challenging trick in layout design, and that's where some designers kind of stumble and fall at first. It takes practice and you'll get it. With your invitation, your grand opening invitation, that we went over some rules and rules to break and rules what not to do and rules of what you should do. And the trick with the invitation design was that the main point was to get my attention by saying grand opening. We didn't want the logo to be big. We didn't want the body text to be big. We wanted grand opening to be big. And we wanted that to be the first thing that my eyes look at. All the other information is kind of a supporting role in this case. So that's what I mean by telling the reader where you want their eyes to go to first. I was never really one to follow rules, but teachers and great artists have some memorable quotes on the subject. One of the ones that I remember reading is, before you can break the rules, you have to know the rules. And to create your own world, you must first understand the real world. So if you study the rule breakers, you can kind of see all, the basics of the learning from the real world and the basics and the evolution that has gone from there. So the rules are pretty basic understanding of layout, type elements of color, etc. So I have a few, I kind of have to laugh at the following inclusion of the 1950s layout design rules. I found on the website the principles are sound, but they still do speak of design basics, like use borders when you want to frame or draw attention to information. Nowadays, we don't even do that. I'll allow the edges of text columns and artwork to create the illusion of borders. That's kind of important. And draw attention to boxes or images by using borders with a drop shadow. We don't use drop shadows anymore. So some of these rules, are kind of outdated, but it's important to understand basic composition. I have a video here, one more that I'd like to show about design principles. This is a good example of unity, balance, contrast, space, and proportion when you're designing. That I will go ahead and pull up here.
It's always a good idea to review basic design principles when you're working with not only typography, but basically anything that you use in graphic design, such as imagery or graphic shapes. In this case, I'm going to focus more on the use of typography as they work with these basic design principles. So I'm going to give you a simple example of each of these 9 principles and how you can think about them when you're working with your text layouts. They are, of course, unity, variety, balance, rhythm, emphasis or focal point, contrast, breathing room, or sometimes called negative or white space, proportion, and scale. The first one I'm going to show is unity. And I have very simple shapes here, and I have some Greeking text to show you examples of how a layout can bring together disparate elements to become unified. And what's working here as far as the layout goes is the way that these elements are aligned. That's what brings these into good unity. Of course, I'm using the same typeface throughout the piece, and that also adds to unity. But I'm pulling these ruler guides down here to show you how different elements are aligned on this piece here. And the most important ones are the 4 margins around the edges. The title and the left side of the paragraph here, and the left side of this gray bar, which could be a photograph or it could be just a basic shape, really serve to bring it together because they're aligned nicely. You can see that there's alignment on the bottom and on the right as well. Now, the darker gray square here the top of it is aligned with the baseline of the word unity, the title, but you could also extend it to the top of this lighter gray square if you wanted to align it with the top of the title. So you do have a little leeway there. But regardless of which you choose, the fact that these are aligned really tightly and nicely serve to give it a good unity and working well together. We can even get away with not having a straight edge on this paragraph. There's a ragged edge here, and that's okay because the outside elements are nicely tightly lined up and serve to work well together. So that is one way you can make unity work in your favor. Variety is another design principle, and these gray squares could indicate paragraphs of text. They could be text or imagery, whatever. But the thing that stands out, of course, is the variety of that red shape in the layout there. Now that could be text set in a different color. It could be a red bar with, say, white text inside of it to be a variety, give variety to the layout of black text on a white background, for instance. It could also be a nice way to separate this third rectangle on the right from the other 2 on the left. Sometimes you have a separate piece of text which is a different topic and you want to separate it from the others yet still take up the same amount of space. So putting a variety element in there, like a different color or a different font, something to break it up, gives visual interest to the page. And you'll get the hang of how to work with variety the more that you do it. A lot of these things take some time to develop, but the more you practice with them, the easier they will become, and you'll start to see ways to make them happen. Balance is the next principle here. And you'll notice that I have a series of rectangles on this page. Again, they could be text, they could be a combination of text and imagery, but they're illustrated here by the color that I've set these in. The largest rectangle is the lightest color. okay? But it is balanced by the smaller rectangle because the smaller one is a darker color. So even though the larger one is bigger, it still balances nicely because it's lighter, but it balances the smaller one quite well. Then we have the third element of the green repeated squares on top of the rectangle on the right there. And these are much brighter than the others, yet they're the smallest. So because they're brighter, their small size helps keep them in balance. So keep in mind that color and size can work to your benefit when you're trying to balance things. You can have something larger and it can be lighter, and the smaller element can be darker or brighter, and you'll get a good balance that way. And of course, alignment always helps to achieve the unity and also helps with a sense of balance. Rhythm is the next principle. Now, rhythm, here's a secret. The way to get a good sense of rhythm in any element you use, whether it be visual or typographic, is repetition. Repetition is what creates the rhythm. Okay? And I have repetition in each of these two words here. The word sail is repeated 5 times in different colors, different tones, so that it sets up a fairly smooth rhythm, but there's a progression there. It almost seems like you start out shouting the word sail, and then you speak it, and then you whisper it because it gets lighter. But the font stays the same, the size, the spacing, everything stays the same except the color. But the repetition is key to setting up the rhythm. And this is a fairly smooth rhythm. Now the word go on the right is a little different. There's some nice unity there because I've kept the same font and of course the same word, but I've changed the scaling, the color, and the angles.
All right, so we're going to stop there just for sake of time. But are you kind of getting the hang of the elements that you're going to need? Your layout visually interesting. Hopefully it's kind of helping give you some good examples. All right, so where are we at? Okay, so we'll run through the rest of these real quick, and then we're going to go do, we'll do the quiz questions, and then we will jump into the demo. And if anybody has questions from last week or this week, now would be the time to ask them. So what we'll do, we'll go through the rest of these slides real quick, and then I'll jump into question time. So basic rules. Please pay attention. Stay out of the dead center, okay? Remember the rule of thirds. You don't want to have anything centered, any text centered. In magazine layouts, things are rarely centered or center aligned, I should say. Stay out of corners. That's very distracting. You kind of want to be in the column grid. Keep balanced space, use cropping for interest, and then fill the space evenly. So we don't want big gaps of white space. We want to be able to have things filled in proportionately. Remember the CRAP model, is the contrast, repetition, alignment, and proximity. And these are all important, and you will be graded on these, so please make sure that you finish out this lecture. Contrast and emphasis. So this creates a visually interesting design. Create hierarchy through contrast by using color, bolding things, shape, placement, or even size, like we talked about text. Here's a magazine article that I absolutely love. This gives excellent contrast. In what ways does this magazine layout use contrast? What are some elements that you see? Color is one, excellent. They use kind of that pop of yellow on that dark background, and gray and yellowish green really complement each other very well. So the yellow stands out really nicely. Otherwise, it'd be totally boring if everything was white and black and white, right? But yellow adds some nice color. Okay, what else? So in terms of the grid system, she talked about the variety by adding or balance by having a large picture on the left. Yeah, the setup. Then you have the smaller pictures on the right with the columns of text that balances out that really heavy photo on the left. So there's a lot of balance going on here. Good job. Repetition. This is just exactly what it sounds like. Things that repeat itself, and you can repeat similar shapes, similar colors, similar fonts. We always say use about 2 fonts max in layouts. Don't use more than that. Make sure they're contrasting, but this repetitious use of fonts will create unity. So we only used about 2 fonts. We make sure elements have a friend. We want there to be some unity there. Here's an example. So in what ways are we creating unity here? Yeah, with the graphic, absolutely. The graphic's tying in the picture and it's also tying in on the right side. It's creating unity and it's creating balance, and that is very effective. Good job, Norma. Thank you. Alignment, so we're talking about balance. This is achieved by making all elements just visually equal on all sides. So ask yourself, do I have an even amount of white space on my left-hand side as I do my right-hand side? Or what about in the middle between my text columns? We need to make sure everything is visually equal on all sides. So in what ways are they creating alignment and balance in this photo? Yeah, the paragraph's excellent because you've got that one long paragraph on the left-hand side, but to balance it out, they have this 3 smaller paragraphs. Remember, we think in terms of odd numbers. So instead of 2 columns, we had the 3-column grid here. So we've got the 3-column grid with 1 long paragraph on the left side and then 3 columns on the right side. That definitely balances things out. Yeah, and the layout of the header text. So you've got heavy all cap text on the left, but to balance out that white space on the right-hand side, they've added all cap text on the right as well. And that kind of really balances things out, especially since they'll be side by side in a magazine. You really want your spread to feel balanced. Good job. So another word is called proximity. This is just simple rules. Keep things from moving off the page or being split by space. So proximity, if you have things spread out too far, they'll look disconnected. If you have things grouped or close together, then they'll look like they're grouped. So do things on purpose, either spread them out on purpose or keep them together on purpose. Proximity and grouping, all these photos are grouped together closely and it's creating what we call proximity. Everything is close together and that's the proximity. The space on the top, the headline, in proximity to the other elements is very spread out, very far from each other. So in that sense, it's disconnected from the actual layout of the pictures and columns of text. Okay, we're not gonna have time for the video, but the more that you see, the more you know. So to seek inspiration for this final project, I want you guys to get on Google and go to Google Images and type typography magazine layout or something like that, or typographic magazine spread. Magazine spread, I want you to be able to see the different layouts, the types, the grid system that these are using. Okay, so that concludes this. Let's see if anything else. Nope, that's it for this class. So let's turn the time over to questions. Are there questions from last week? Are there questions that you have on this assignment? Anything that you would like to know? The floor is yours. No, nothing? Okay, so what we're gonna do then. Okay, so Brianne makes a good point. So mostly that the papers that you wrote are kind of short for a 2-page. That is true. There are 2 things that you can do. First one, Brianne, is usually students will create lots of graphics for their layout. So you don't really need that much text. And in fact, the layouts that I'm gonna do will show you how to use just like 1 paragraph of text. And so you won't need a whole lot. But if you find yourself needing to balance things out, you're more than welcome to grab some content off the internet and kind of place that in your columns of text to kind of add balance to it. Does that help? So you have the 2 options. Either use what you have and you make it work and use kind of large graphics, or you can grab more text off the internet. Yeah, in fact, you can. That's a great idea. You could definitely use your portrait as the graphic for your magazine. That would be a great idea. If you use the same font that you wrote about, definitely. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. In fact, that might be a good idea to use. I guess it never dawned on me. The only thing that you will be needing to include that was kind of towards the bottom of the requirements was you need to include the full alphabet and all the characters 0 through 9. So you need to figure out kind of how you're going to lay that out. So yeah, you can include your portrait, but make sure you leave space for the alphabet. So Norma, what you're going to use for this layout is simply typography. So there's not going to be any vector art or anything, no pictures or photographs, but you can use your Illustrator, your portrait. If you designed it in the same font as your paper, you can use that. Yes, and you can also use your typographic characters for the layout. Does that answer your question? These are great questions, by the way. Yeah, and when I do a demo, you'll see kind of the options that you have. You'll absolutely be able to see that. Right now, I am pulling up the quizzes so we can go over them. And then we'll go into our 10-minute break, and then when we come back, we'll just do design. I'll show you some different layouts that you can do. Okay, so we're on week 4. Did everyone do today's? Do we need to do today's? Everyone knows today's? Everyone? Okay. You guys are on the ball. All right, let's go through Saturday. We stop the share here, pull it up. Okay. So let's do this one together. Again, I haven't seen these until now, so we'll just see what we can find. Okay, so this is a financial aid question. Can I remove my loans once they have been consolidated? The answer is no. Okay. Or false, I guess. All right. And answer was true. Oh, did I answer true? Whoops, I thought I answered false. Okay, so the answer is false. Sorry. Try it again. You'll want to watch this video, but once items are grouped, you'll see what kind of an outline around them. What do you think? A blue outline? You'll see a red outline around them when they're grouped. So when you draw a text box or an object, you'll have that blue outline colored box around them. Your anchor points will all be blue, but when you have a group of them, the color will change, and you'll see that in the video. So those are good guesses, though. I guess according to the video, I guess it makes it a little confusing. Another video question, the symbol panel icon looks like a, what do you think? A club? I actually don't know this one. I haven't paid attention to it, so we'll find out. Oh, I forgot to answer it. It's a club. Good job. And last one. Before you can edit your symbol, you will need to click what on the symbol? Before you can edit your symbol, you'll need to click on the symbol, break the link, edit the symbol, edit link. What do you guys think? Okay, I would think so. We'll see. You need to break the link. You'll see that if you watch the video. It'll make more sense. Wow, we were 0 for 0 today. Well, at least I was. Okay, so those are the quiz questions. Hopefully you get them right now. You can learn from my mistakes. We're going to go ahead and go to our 10-minute break. And then when we come back, we'll do the demo. So have your InDesign launched. That'll be the fun part. And we'll go over some ways to lay out our final project and get a head start on it. And you'll find out the things that you'll be required to learn or to do for your final. Everything you'll be graded on, and everything will be in the grading rubric as well. All right, guys, we'll see you in 10 minutes. Okay, so let's start with our design. Is everybody ready? Okay, perfect. So let me first pull up the InDesign and get a new document set up. We'll go over how to set up a document. I'll do the desktop so you can actually see. All right. I need to figure out if there is a way that I can have the screens side by side. It doesn't usually let me do that. Whoops, here we go. Go to the assignments. Then we'll go to our final newsletter design. Or I'm sorry, magazine design. I'm in 103. Oh, it always does that. It defaults. Try it again. Here we are. Okay, so to lay this out, we'll be InDesign only. We'll need to make sure our margins are given specific measurements, and it's 8.5 by 11. So let's keep these margins up and are kind of open so that I can set this up. So you'll go to File, New Document. We'll be doing a 2-page spread for your magazine. So you'll want to enter in 2 pages, and you want it to select facing pages. So I guess we need 3 pages because the first one will be the cover. So 3 pages, and you'll see why in just a minute. Letter, normal size, portrait layout, and then the margins, we were given specific measurements. So I'm going to need to pull up so it's on the top is 0.625. And this is in inches, 0.625, type in inches. And then I'm going to go ahead and break the chain here so that I can enter in specific measurements for the other. The outside is 6.25, so that's fine. And then bottom is 0.875, 0.875 inches, and 0.75 inches for the inside. 0.75 inches. Okay, and then you don't have to worry about bleed and slug at this point, but I always like to preview, have this box checked just so that I can see that it's setting it up correctly. The reason why we want facing pages is so that our layout or our spread is what we call is side by side. And as you can see here in my pages document, these 2 pages are side by side. Good question. So just like at the beginning of class, I'll show you. So we'll hit OK because this is set up correctly. Your inside margins, just like on the first slide that I showed you with all the definitions, this is your outside margin. The purple line is your margin line. So you're just setting up what inside and outside is. The inside of your margin line is right here. Or I'm sorry, right here. The inside, okay? Nope, that's totally fine. It's a good question. We want to make sure we understand. Just if you want to go back and see a more visual example. So the inside is right here. This is the inside of your margin line. So it's on the right side of your page, and then the outside is outside your margin line. And your margin line is this purple magenta looking line that you see. Yes, right, is inside. Because the reason why it's inside is because you've got this right here. It's an inside of the page. Outside is outside your margin line. So you're just setting up how wide or what size your purple box is going to be, is basically what you're doing. And the reason why we did 3 pages, you're probably saying, well, it's only a 2-page spread. What am I supposed to do with the 3rd page? Answer is nothing. You're not supposed to do anything with the 3rd page. The 3rd page is actually the cover. There's always 1 page set up, and then you want your spread. So here's your double, or we call it like a double truck or a double spread. And this is your spread. This is what you'll be working on. Now, I pulled a few visual examples. I just went on Google to kind of see if there were any things that I could pull my inspiration from. And one of them, let's see if I can find it. Hold on, I've got a lot going on here. Here's one. I'll throw that in. Okay. Right, like this. So there's a few things that you need to know when you're setting up your document. I'll pull my example off to the side for just a minute. We need to do our folio. Does anybody remember what the folio is? We need to set that up. Let me grab the list of requirements so I can make sure we have this all set up. Yeah, exactly, Norma. It's on your master page. That's exactly right. It's the number, page number, and you usually do that on your master page. So I'm going to pull this out. This is just the requirements. So we already have the margin set up, so that's done. I can check that off my list. We have the article and the spread laid out. Well, not the article, but we have the spread set up. So that's done. And this, now we have the rest of these elements to do. And this might be a good habit to get into. Pull in the requirements, and every time you do one, to delete it so that you can check it off your list, or however you want to indicate that you've actioned it. Okay, so first thing we need to do is the folio, which are the page numbers. You do that in the master. Right over here, if you have your pages dialog box open, if you don't have your pages box open, just go to your drop-down window menu. Everything is alphabetized, so you'll just find pages. Make sure it's check marked, and if it is, that means it's already open. So you'll go here. You'll double check on your A master, and notice how one of the pages is grayed out. Which page is grayed out? Can you tell me? Which one is grayed out on the A master? Is it the left or right page? Yeah, right, the left one, the one I'm on. Just so you know, and you can double check, you can just double click it, and you can toggle between the two, so it's a good indicator. Some students don't understand the view of the A master. They're like, well, which page am I on? They don't understand that the grade one is the one that you're on, and you can double click to toggle. These are your actual pages, okay? A similar concept. If it's grade, that means you're on that page. But for the A master, we're gonna go ahead and set up our folio. Again, at the beginning of class, I showed that magazine layout that you can take, and it will have all the definitions that you need to include and how to lay them out. So I'll take my folio, and I usually like to lay my folio out on the outside bottom margin, and I'll just draw a text box. And you'll see this dotted line up here. That means that you've done it correctly. It means it's a master element, which means it will be applied to all the other pages that you add from here on out, or that the pages that you already have set up. So you're going to go to Type, your drop-down menu, Insert Special Character, Markers, Current Page Number. Do you guys see that? Insert Special Character, Markers, Current Page Number. So what I want you to do is I want you to open up your InDesign document. I want you to set up your document, set up the margins, just like I did, and get the 2-page spread laid out. And I want you to practice putting in your folio, your bottom page number. So I click on current page number. Now it doesn't give me a number, it'll give me a letter. And so you're saying, well, that's not a page number. What it does is it's just a marker that will show where your page number will appear on every page. So now that I go to my actual pages, page 2, hey, look, it's there. What if I go, and it will only appear on the left-hand side because I've only set it up on the left-hand side. Now I'm actually going to have to go and bring it over here. And you usually have your folio on the right-hand side of the right page and your folio on the left-hand side on your left page. So this is where I'm positioning this one. Okay. So now if I go to my right-hand side, now there's my page 3. You'll see my page 2 positioned at the same place. So I use my margin box to kind of line that text box up. So this is what I want you to do, is set up a page number on your folio. What you can do also, so as I'm talking, go ahead and do that. Get your double spread laid out. And I want to see everybody's, just, if you don't want to share, that's fine. But this is the time to get my help on it, because I guarantee we're going to have questions when we end. So I want to make sure everyone's on the same page. I also want to show you here that if you highlight, oops, go to my master page. You can also format. So this would be page number, and then I'll tab over here to, this will be the name of the magazine. Or you can do the name of your font. And this is usually done in a smaller font than the rest of your magazine. So I usually like to pick maybe a 9-point font or 8-point font, something very small. And I usually try to set it apart. So in this case, I'll probably do an italic. For the page number itself, I'll probably just do a bold. Again, I'm using contrast here. And then that's my folio. I'll do the same thing here. I want to take that text, but this time I want it to be at the beginning. And I want the size to be 8-point font. And for this little guy here, the page number, I want it to be bold. So I'm bolding this one. So as I'm talking, I hope you're setting this up. I'm going to go ahead and use this. My rulers and guides are turned on. I'm going to make sure everything is lined up perfectly. I'm going to get this A as close as I can to the edge. Won't let me quite get there. All right. So there's my footer, okay? Now that's my folio. I go to page 2, I can see it's there. I go to page 3, I can see it's there, and it's already automatically numbered for me. So does anyone have any questions as they're setting this up? Do you guys remember the steps? Are you stuck? Or maybe give you 2 minutes to kind of do it on your own, and let me know if you want to share your screen so I can check and make sure everyone did it right. I'll give you a few minutes to work on it. Okay, Brianne, yours did not put letters in, it put the number. Okay, go to, can you share your screen just so I can see it? Oh, I'm sorry, let me close out of mine. Okay, now you should be able to. Okay, and then when you pull up your pages, okay, so it looks like you inserted it onto your page. You have to take it to your master. You have to do it on your master page. So you're on page 2 right now, which is where you inserted the page number, but you have to go to your master pages. So double click on your left master page. There you go. And this is where you'll set it up. And you'll know you're in the right place if when you draw your text box, it has a dotted line around it. Any objects on the master have a dotted line around it. That's kind of differentiates the master elements from the actual page elements. So good job. Hopefully that helps. So anybody else running into some snags? Any questions? Okay, and so now that we have that folio laid out, I'll give you another minute or two to get your document set up. It does take a while. So another thing that I want you to be careful of is when you're laying out your elements, I usually use the margin line as kind of my ruler and guide. But if you want something that's a little bit more reliable, or not reliable, but if you just want an actual ruler, you can grab your ruler from the left and just click and drag. This is a ruler line, a ruler guide that will help you line up your text boxes so you can see if your text box falls over or past your ruler. You'll know how to set it up. Oh, and Norma, it looks like your video is on. There you go. So another helpful tip is to be able to grab your rulers. So you can click and drag from your ruler on the left, and you can click and drag your ruler on the right. And this will help you line up bodies of text. If you want to get rid of them, just select them and delete. Click delete. How to put the title of the magazine again? Oh, yes. Sure, absolutely. So on the master page or on the folio, is that what you're referring to? Okay, so to get it to the other, so I like having the, remember the left page number needs to be on the left-hand side of the left page, and the right page number needs to be on the right-hand side of the right page. So the way that I do the folio is I just hit tab until I get to the very end. So after I've entered in my page number, I just kind of hit tab a few times. You'll type out what you want it to say. In this case, I just type typography and then my name of my article, and I'll hit the space bar until the letters line up perfectly with that purple margin line. Does that help? And then for the right box, because it's tabbed all the way through, I just put it on the left-hand side and use the space bar and the tab button to kind of get as accurate as you can. Good questions. Oh no, Norma, you missed the margins. The margins are in the assignment. So if you want to pull that up and just kind of start over. Sandy, let's see. Sandy, how are things going with you? Are you okay? All right, sounds good. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on. Are there any other questions on how to set up your folio on your master page? Remember, make sure you're on your master pages. Master pages were always so confusing to me when I was in school. It just blew my mind that there could be another set of pages that controlled everything. But it's actually very helpful to have, because in this case, it doesn't really matter. Yes, you could manually enter in page 2, page 3, but you wouldn't have everything lined up perfectly, and you might forget, or if you were working on a 100-page document, you would want to save yourself some time. So this way, master pages, if you can get the hang of them, they're a great way to save you time. Makes things a little bit more efficient, I think. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the design portion. So once, or to our list actually. So we can take off folio page numbers once we've done that. It's a good way of kind of chipping away at our to-do list here. So let's talk about the overall layout. So before you approach this, I want you to think in terms of columns. We're going to do a 3-column grid. In fact, I'll show you an easy way to do that. I know some of you have already set up your document, so I do apologize, but here's a way that you can set up the columns. And I did forget to do this before. We'll need to go back and do this. Once you have your margins all set up, for the columns, you'll want to go 1, 2, 3, and it will automatically set up your margins for you. The gutter is already 1 pica space, so that is already set up. So we might have to go and redo this so that we can have the gutter. So I do apologize, we skipped that step. I'm moving too fast. Let's try this again. I'm going to try to pull this so I can see. So we'll go to new document. And if you already have your document and folio in place, you can just copy and paste it over into the new document. So in this case, I'm going to do number of pages is 3, deselect facing pages. It's letter size, so nothing changes there, but we do adjust the columns. Now you can work with whatever column or grid system that you want. I found that it's most helpful to use the 3-column grid. I think for beginners, it's less overwhelming and kind of is good even space. So I say we start there. And then the top margin, remember, break your chain link here so that you can enter in different values. And remember to type in inches after it so that you get the approximate value. So 6 to 5 inches. Tab it over. To the bottom is 0.875 inches. And then the left is, let's see, does it put it the inside? Hold on. 0.75 inches. Okay, hit OK. Oops, that is not okay. Hold on, 1 second. There we go. The top is 0.625 inches. The bottom is 0.875 inches. The inside is 0.75 inches. And the outside is 0.625 inches. There we go. Now I'll adjust the columns. So now I want 3 columns. So I do recommend doing the margins first. This will give you even amount of spacing. And then we'll do 3 pages. Keep selecting facing pages selected. Everything looks good. Now we can hit OK. So you should have your pages look like this. So we have our 3-column grid situation going on. So I apologize, I missed the gutters. So Norma missed the margins, I missed my gutters. So we're trying to make sure we got it laid out. So now if you're like me and you've already set things up, you can easily just kind of copy things over. You can just grab your boxes from your master. So I'll hit Command C if you're on a Mac or Control C to copy if you're on a PC. Once I have my text boxes selected, then I'll go to my master on my new spread. I'll right click, paste in place. We'll put them exactly where I had them before. So right click, paste in place. That should help you get it set up. All right, so now we're back in business. So I'm gonna grab my handy list here. I think I might have deleted my list. Oh well. Let me show you a design real quick that you might want to consider. It's right here. I found this. I thought this was a kind of a neat way to feature the letters. And one way that you can do it is if you find a layout that you like, you can obviously expand it to the size of the page, hide the layer, and you can cut a trace over, adjust the opacity like this, and you can kind of trace over it and get things lined up where you want. So what I'm going to do is get some text. I'm just going to grab Sandy, it can be as many columns as you want. I suggest 3 columns. It seems to be the traditional magazine kind of layout. You could go 4 if you wanted. I would not go less than 2. Okay. And 2 is fine if you decide to do that. To be honest with you, if you do 3, the columns are skinnier and there's more space in between. So it actually fills up the page more if you have less content. 3-column grid is actually better, because it will fill it in more. It'll look like you have more. 2-column is fine. I don't think it says a specific column. I'm looking in the requirements now. I don't think it says how many columns you have to have as long as you have a grid system. So you should be okay. Just kind of play around and see what you want. And remember, if you need more content, you can kind of grab it off of Google. That's fine. Or use your artwork. So I'm going to show you how to do the artwork now. We want something that's visually pleasing. I grabbed three different, kind of pasted in here. Here's one that I thought was pretty neat. This one uses white space quite a bit. And in fact, I think it might be a little too much white space, but it's a neat introduction to an article where you have the artwork on the left side contained into a box. This could be a great place where you could put the letters or the characters or even your portrait if you want. Then it's got the name of the font here, but this is in a 2-column grid itself. And it's got that folio on the bottom. This is pretty neat. So that's one option. The other one, if you have to use your headline, it could look something like this. And what this also kind of serves a double purpose is by doing this, you are also using the entire alphabet, which is also required for your final project. You do need to have 0 through 9 characters and the alphabet present. So that it would be kind of a cool way to incorporate it in the headline. You could even do this. Expand it to both. And then have the columns of text underneath it. That could be a neat way and a neat artistic visual way to display it. So let's do high quality here. See if it'll give us, it's so low res. I'll actually recreate it for you. So I'll type in the headline. And this would work, this works well with a sans serif font, not a serif font. So I'm going to change this to Helvetica. And I'm going to go bold. I'm going to do create outlines. Whoops. Type create outlines, just kind of like we did with the logo design. And this way I can kind of line it up and see, kind of gauge where I want it to go. And then I'm going to grab my either your line tool or a rectangle box. And this will serve as the L. And I'll fill that. And then the rest of the word. So I'll draw my text box, Vetica. And then make sure I'm on the proper. And this time I'll just do a regular. So we have to use bold and regular. We have to display that. And so this, in this case, I'm going to use regular. I'm going to go to type, create outlines, kind of enlarge it. This is where I'll put it on the vertical. This doesn't always work, but if it's done right, you can get away with a really cool layout. There we go. So that's laid out there. So Brianne asked, how would you divide it so it does get lost in the seam of 2 pages? Okay, good question. So I'm about to do that, or so it doesn't get lost in the seam of pages. That's a good question. So it's just all about positioning. So what I'm about to do is show you, we're going to go ahead and, as I've got upper and lowercase. So I'm going to make this much smaller so I can kind of see what they're doing. I'm going to line this up. I'm going to grab my line here. My line can go all the way across. That's fine. It'll be kind of a neat way of creating continuance, unity, balance. I'm just going to play around with the line widths a little bit. I think maybe 9 would be a good width. All right, so now I've got my line going all the way across, and I'm using my margin guides to stop so that everything ends at the right place. I'm making sure my lines go right there. This I do need to bring in. My H needs to be inside the margin line, And I need to make sure this is adjusted. So to answer, so you said dotted may, I'm sorry, I can't understand what you typed, Brianne. Can you try again? Oh, a dotted line could be cool with the letter over and under each dot. Yeah, that could be cool. Let's see. We just don't want to make it too busy, but you could definitely try. I think what our artist was doing here was everything with Helvetica, it's very square and very boxy font. So they were trying to maintain that boxy look with the square, the rectangle, the long line. If you add the circles, this would probably work for a more rounded font. But that's not a bad idea. Could definitely try it. I'll place the letters and then we'll play with the dotted line and see what that looks like. So this will be a good place to display my characters. So again, it's just a matter of typing in A, B. All right, so I've got the whole alphabet here. Again, I'm going to change it to Helvetica, if this was the font that you did. And I'll keep it regular. And this time I'm going to adjust the size. So I'm going to adjust, I don't want it too big. I'm going to kind of play with the spacing. Now to answer Brianne's previous question on how do you avoid the divide with the page, we want to just make sure our spacing is evened out. So what I'm doing is just adjusting the tracking a little bit to get that divide or that spacing just right. There we go. So in this case, it should be fine. I'm going to go ahead and center it though, so that the page divide is right in between that H and J evenly. And I'll just adjust my line accordingly. So everything still lines up. There's an even amount of space on the inside margins there. And now I'll just copy and paste this box right underneath it. I've already typed the letters, so I'm going to go to Type, Change Case, and click on Lowercase. So now I don't have to retype everything, but I may still need to reformat everything. I'll have to still space out the letters. Oops. I'll bring it in a little bit more. There we go. So now everything is spaced, and now I'm going to just give it an even amount of space so the gap between the letters are the same. All right, so there's my uppercase, my lowercase. Now, it is not outside the margin. Oh, thank you. Let's try that again. So it's not outside the margin. There's nothing outside of the margin at this point, except my example. Once I get rid of this, everything is inside of the margin. So if you'll notice, Brianne, the outside of the margin is right here, and right here. Those are the outsides of the margin. The only design is happening inside the margin box. So all the design is happening within it. So I'm still following the rules. I haven't typed on the outside. Does that make sense? So it's okay to have design on the inside margin. That's fine. Right here, it's okay here. The idea that we want to be careful with is when you're designing, the reason why you want to avoid having too much by the inside margin is because the page does fold. So when you open the book, it doesn't always display everything unless everything was laid completely flat. And with a magazine, it's not just the way it's bound. kind of prevents the spread from opening all the way. So that's what they say. So so it's fine if it's on the inside. I may encourage you to perhaps make that gap between the two letters a little bit bigger so there is more space between it. As long as it's evenly spaced and there's some breathing room, you should be okay. In this case, it is a little close to the fold. So what I would probably do is shrink down the font a little bit and then space it out like this so that there's a little bit more space between the letters and the inside page. So that would be appropriate. That would be okay. Does that make sense? So as long as you don't have text on the outside of the margins, you should be okay. You just don't want to be too close to this black line right here. Okay, you want some space. And I'm giving it a couple centimeters of space, so it should be okay for the fold. And I've kept it pretty evenly spaced as much as possible. Yeah, the PQ spacing is kind of weird, so we got to watch out for that. So you could adjust that in the kerning. You could just open your window dialog box and adjust it here. I'm going to go ahead and move on because we're running out of time. I want to go ahead and finish this layout for you guys. But yes, you have good eyes, and that's definitely what we need to make sure is fixed. So I'm going to go ahead. I don't know why it's spaced like that. It's kind of weird. I'll have to adjust it later. Okay. There we go. I'm looking to make sure that my letters line up perfectly with each other. I want to make sure that each letter lines up. And if it looks like it does, then I'm in good shape. So now I'll go ahead and delete these. And there you have it. This would be actually a good place too if you wanted to do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You wanted to do that so it doesn't go across. You're going to need to include the numbers and the characters as well. Yeah, thanks. The PQ spacing is missing. We'll fix that another time. Right now I've got to move on with the rest of the layout. But this is a great place to start. So now, well, what else do you do? Okay, well now we need a byline. So this is Woodland. And in this case, it is Helvetica. For contrast, I'll just do this. You can choose to put the byline right underneath the headline, or you could do something like it could finish the line. There's lots of different places where you can put it, just like that. Another thing you can do is place it vertically, but we've already got something vertical going on, so I just want to create balance. So I'm going to go ahead and have it here underneath the H. And again, it just needs to be small, so I'll do 11-point font. That's all it needs. And now I can start laying out my text boxes. So use these beautiful margin lines to lay out your text boxes. And you'll want to make sure there's one for each. Make sure they're the same size, and you want to make sure that they end at the same place, okay? Same amount of space on the bottom right there. See that? They'll end at the same place and they begin at the same place. And there's a perfect amount of space in the gutter make sure that is preserved, okay? Once you have your text, let's put our flow in our text. I'll do another quick layout option for you. All right. So if you have something like this, one idea you can do is kind of pull it down. Maybe use this as your pull quote option. The only thing that I want to see is I want to make sure that your your text lines end at the same point. You might have heard me say that before. And that's only if you were to draw a ruler down at the bottom, would your lines of text sit at the same point on that ruler. Okay, we want it to be even all the way across. Okay, so that's an option. Oops. And don't forget, just because you don't have a lot of text doesn't mean that you'll have to use a pull quote. You're going to need to use your whole alphabet. Make sure all this lines up. And then I could probably put a pull quote here. I have all this empty space at the top right of my box. So what I need to do is add something visual there. So this is where I will put my pull quote in. You'll need quotations to make it interesting. And I'm going to bold it. Maybe semi-bold italic to make it different. And I'll make it a little bit bigger, like this. Nice big. Now, I'm not going to, because I'm using the 3-column grid, I'm going to remember our example on the PowerPoint. I'm going to use this going over 2 of the 3 columns to create some balance and fill in that space. You can even kind of keep it close and knit. And then I like to kind of make the quotations a little bigger. This adds some interest, but when you do that, it will kind of mess with your spacing. So what you'll need to do is, whoops, bring that back in. And I use, I can see where it is. I use this tool right here, the baseline shift, and I'm kind of bringing it down. And then that way I can bring my line of text back up. So there's my quote. So, and then we also want to watch out for hyphenate. Make sure your hyphenate box is unchecked so we don't have any widows or orphans, any lines of text like that. So now this is pretty evenly spaced. I like it. As far as balance is concerned, this is about all you need. You could even put your face portrait on this somewhere, but it's got a good balance of white space, and it's got a good headline, good artistic elements going on here. I could add a drop cap. Drop caps are very nice at the beginning of your paragraphs. So I'll do 2, 3. I wouldn't go bigger than 3 lines. And then you'll need to decide, are you going to do a hard return or an indent? I like doing indents. And they need to be even, because I don't usually like the gaps. So that is all evenly spaced. There's not a whole lot left that you need to do. I think let's go back to our list and see. Let's grab this list. It does say that 1/3 to half of your page needs to be the actual graphic display. So that's why I made my headline my graphic. Yeah, I'll need to fill in the lowercase letters down here, and you can do that later. And then we'll need to, so let's look at our list. So we've got contrast, repetition, alignment, proximity. I think I've achieved those. Use of positive and negative space. I've got a lot of white space that creates breathing room. It doesn't look so crammed in there, but I also have balance. I've got my 3-column grid. There's 3 columns on the left, 3 columns on the right. I've also got a nice heavy pull quote to kind of balance out the heavy headline on the left. So I'm using my positive and negative space good. The only thing I haven't done is color. I can easily do that. A neat way to work in color is to kind of add pops of color subtly. It doesn't have to be the rainbow, but this is a kind of a neat way to add division. You can kind of throw in some color that way. Maybe make the drop cap a certain color, kind of tie it all in. So that would be a good way of incorporating color, but not going crazy with it. So we've done color. Angle, slope, we've kind of created an angle here. I've created a slope. I've used my italics here, my oblique and my cursive in my pull quote. I've also bolded, so that's a weight change. I've bolded it here. I've bolded my headline. I've used regular font here in my paragraph text. So weight change is checked. Width expanded and condensed. I've made sure that I used a bold. I made sure that I used a regular. And then scale size. So I've adjusted my point size. All my body text is the same size. My headline uses various sizes. The one thing I do want to point out to you is just make sure that when you're laying out your text boxes that they don't come too close to your folio. So if you're going to line up your text boxes all the way to the end of your margin line, sometimes they can touch the folio. So just make sure you adjust your folio box. Maybe bring it down just a little bit. And that way you give plenty of breathing room between your folio and your text box. Now you want to see a disconnect there. That is important to have that breathing room between your folio and your text. You want a good 5 returns difference. And that is a pretty strong layout, I would say. You've got all the elements there. Now, if you wanted to do something else, there's another option. Just go to Google, like I said, and kind of look up different layouts. These were just the 2 that stuck out to me as kind of a simple way to lay things out. This one here is kind of small, so I'll just show you. This looks like it's in a 4-column grid. The way it's laid out, you've got 1 column, 2, 3, 4, and that's okay. You can kind of work with it even with a 3-column grid if you wanted to. But it all starts with grabbing your headline. So Helvetica, and I'll make sure I'm on the right font. Once I have my letters nice and big, I'll go to type create outlines, and then I'll ungroup. Let's see if I can get it pulled in here. For some reason, this isn't letting me unlock it. That's odd. Anyways, you can kind of just maybe just draw the letters individually. And use your margins and stay within your margin line. Kind of get creative with like where you're going to place it. You've got a lot of letters in this word, so you'll want to make sure that everything is placed correctly and makes sense. But I'm giving some variation here to the letters, so that might help create some contrast. So I'm using the staggered look. Okay, Brianne, so the same concept here. So you are able to use color. In fact, you're supposed to. It's on your list of requirements. You need to use color. And I was demonstrating here that you don't need to use a lot of colors. Just one simple accent color is probably all you'll need for your layout. That you don't need a colorful. And I do want to tell you to avoid colored backgrounds. When they say include color, I don't want colored backgrounds. It just tends to kind of muddle things up, and you get too reliant on that background and it really messes things up. So try to avoid colorful backgrounds, okay? You can even do something, I don't know, you can do something graphically if you wanted to. Your portrait will be pretty sufficient enough. And I'm going to go here, and you can do anything that will add some visual interest, basically. And in this case, I'm just going to go in and adjust the transparency of some of these. And so long as you have it included on you could add something like that. Although it doesn't really need it, and you wind up just messing up the layout, just adding too much remember, keep it simple. But anyway, with the color, just add pops of color to your text. Now for the drop cap, you simply go to your drop cap settings, go to Window, type Tables, let's see, I think it's in Character. And then it might not be in Character, actually. I think it's right up here in your character formatting controls. It's right here, the drop cap. Or let's see, where is it? Sorry, I lost it. That's your baseline shift. Maybe it's in your... Where is it? Where did it go? Oh, here it is. Your drop cap. So it's right here under maybe your paragraph settings. I think it's under your paragraph settings. There we go. So your drop cap is right here. Drop cap, number of lines, and that's what I use. So under your paragraph settings, you'll go to this one. I'll close out the character so we don't get confused. You can't see the paragraph settings? Can you see this box right here? Okay, so this box right here, do you see if you hover over it, it says drop cap number of lines. This is where you change it, right here. Oh, you can't see the top of my screen. Oh, I apologize. I thought I was on the desktop. Here, let me change that for you guys. All right, so that basically concludes our lecture. Are there any questions how to do something? So we saw how we do the drop cap. The drop cap's up here. All your paragraph formatting controls are at the top of your screen, if that's how you have it set up. If you don't, you can simply open the dialog box by going to your tool or your type in tables, select paragraph right here. You can stagger this look. Just remember to use your lines. If you like that look, just go on Google and see if you find something that speaks to you. You can even use this kind of a layout if you want. It's totally up to you, but hopefully you feel creative and you're able to do something that makes it really pop. Now, I liked the idea of using your portrait. That was a cool idea. So let me know if you guys have any questions before we end. So are we feeling confident? Do we have a good handle on what's expected? Check out the grading rubric. It's all there. And just shoot me an email if you have any questions. This Thursday is our last multi-session, so hopefully everybody comes and I can look over your assignments. I can even help you. Just let me know what would be best, okay? How I can best help. All right, and then I just wanted to put it out there. I'll be sending out an email. Just double check your grades and make sure everything is good. After this week, I can't make any changes. So if you see something that's out of place or not correct, which I wouldn't put it past me, there's always room for error. So let me know, and I'll be happy to take care of that for you guys. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate your participation. I hope you have fun. I cannot wait to see what you guys have done for this layout, this newsletter layout. I was blown away with your portraits, and I'm excited to see what you can come up with the next. So you guys have a great last week, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.